To another digital new releases video. This is the sixth that I've done this year, and I'm trying to get this done because the quantity of new releases has become prolific, to say the least, and I've got about over a dozen that I need to comment on. So I'm going to rush this one through. There should be about 6 on here. Some very brief, others a bit longer. I'm going to start with Field Music, their latest album, Flat White Moon. They're an English rock band from Sunderland in England, formed in 2004. They consists of brothers David Brewis and Peter Brewis, and they added in Andrew Moore on keyboards. And the first album was released in 2005. Field Music, one of the few bands really to outlast the indie guitar band explosion of the mid-2000s. To describe the band, it's probably a truly artful proposition in the pseudo-field landscape of contemporary Brit art rock vintage pop styles. And they are described as chamber pop. Anybody knows what chamber pop is? Maybe you can tell me. I just saw it as thoroughly interesting pop music with a hint of progressive rock and certainly indie. 2015, they were acknowledged by the immortal Prince in one of his interviews, and a year later they appeared on the TV music show Later with Jules Holland, and the BBC poll did a sort of poll. The BBC did a poll on those artists on that show in that year, and this band were seen as the best act of the series. So this is their 9th album, and I guess we better get on with it. Going to go fleetingly through the tracks. Orion for the Street starts as very spacey psychedelic, I thought, 70s pop with modern rhythmic circles that pumps out the synth. Next up, Do Me a Favour. It's got California-like harmonies, but the sound is very British. Not When You're in Love, jazz piano throws up a progressive look to this, and it really does feel quite nice. Out of the Frame is next. Influences poke through that you might have heard in the 70s prog band Yes, but only minimally. And a complex rhythmic structure comes out with splattering lead work. 5, When You Last Heard from Linda, dirge-like violins start this song off, and the vocals sound not too dissimilar from John Lennon. And then the final track on side 1, No Pressure, probably my favourite. It's got a heavy bass wah-wah feel to it, very indie, and there's a lot of oohing in the chorus. 10cc riffs mingling alongside Talking Heads sort of beats. That's what I thought. The second side I'm not commenting on here, otherwise it ends up as a full review. But overall, quite impressed with this band, and I'll certainly listen to them again. Here, Outside Child by a woman, Alison Russell. And Alison started off working in a band called Pogirl around about 2003 and stayed with them for 7 years. They released 7 albums, none of which I've heard. But she's certainly a talented Canadian songwriter and musician. Very much a blues feel to some of her tracks, and she also has got a very world-like sort of take on her material. Just a brief look at the first side. Montreal, which is sang in French and English. It's a nice, gentle, easy, soft rock beginning. Night Flyer, more melody here, but it's still folk rock, but it's got a bluesy vocal style. And track 3 is Persephone. It's got some country pedal steel guitar in here, which is very nice. And then Fourth Day Prayer a standard soulful rock beat with harmonies, which throws up a bit of a gospel touch. And then The Runner, a nice closer on side one. Now, I could have gone through the second side, but again, this is new releases. All I'm saying is, this is quite nice, and I suggest you give it a listen. I'm certainly going to do after this video. This third one then is called Jubilee, and it's by a band called Japanese Breakfast. Well, they are, in fact, singer and songwriter Michelle Zorna, and she had another band that she started in 2011 called Little Big League. I haven't heard any of that material, but she is aka Japanese Breakfast. It's got a very tropical 80s synth pop sound with a 90s sort of shoegaze with sophisticated adult contemporary, very aesthetic. And I must admit, I've listened to this now 3 times, and I absolutely love it. Just a few tracks then. Paprika, high energy with feminine vocals on top of some swirling synths and strings, and it's very accomplished, lush production. Second song is Be Sweet. It's got a crisp synth sound which sweeps over with a disco beat, and the strings again are very sonically expansive. Third track, Kokomo Inn, delivers a warm smoochy feel to this jazz-like ballad, which has depth following the arrangements. I love the vocal delivery in front of the violins, and there's some nice meandering guitar on it as well. Then to track 4, which is a personal favourite, Slide Tackle. It's got a skippy jazz rock edge with rhythm guitars. The riffs are very soft, a great beat, and the horns bring back memories of Sade back in the mid-80s. They glide along seductively, and it really swings as more the track develops. Wonderful stuff. And then Posing in Bondage, another big favourite. Starts slow with some mystic strings laden in the sound, and it creates a montage of sensual delight with echo on the vocals and whooshy, is that a word? Whooshy oriental layered synth textures. It's drenched in a hypnotic beat, and it's definitely a highlight. The second side will come up in a full review of this one. It's one of the best albums I've heard, certainly in the last few months. So suggest you give it a listen. Jubilee by Japanese Breakfast. Continue now with this new releases, episode 6. The fourth offering, Teenage Fan Club, Endless Arcade. This is in fact their 11th album, and it's the first without their founding member, Gerard Love. He's the bassist and singer. I don't know much about this band, but I do know that they're a Scottish rock band, and they are in the music scene at the back end of the 80s, and there were 3 singer-songwriters that contributed material to their albums. The music was very much late 60s inspired folk rock sound with supple vocal harmonies, sparkling guitar arpeggios and ringing organ lines. Beautifully read, I must admit, from Wikipedia by myself. I'm going to briefly go through this album. I have to say I was a little disappointed. I hadn't heard any of their earlier material, and it was expecting something a little bit more in your face, I guess. But obviously I don't know much about this band. So let's go through briefly some of the songs. The opener, Home, 7 minutes, opens with as an extended guitar piece on top of some basic indie beat here. The solo reminded me a little bit of Jerry Garcia at one point. The next couple of tracks I just described as MOR, middle of the road. Track 4 had a Velvet Underground feel to it. Everything is falling apart. and there was also maybe a little bit of Sonic Youth thrown in there as well. It was quite earthy, and less the pretty boy rock image. 5, The Sun Won't Shine on Me, lots of harmonies here, with that chord melody, creating a very nice tone, and Come With Me, delicate psychedelic grooves on here. In Our Dreams, introduced a bit of fuzz guitar on intro. It was genteel, relaxing. The title sums it up really. I went into a dream state a little bit. The second side I didn't really go into on the third listen, this was, in any detail. But I did note that I'm more inclined, seem to have a slightly Brinsley Schwarzenegger glow feel to it. So overall, pretty mediocre, I thought. But I'd be interested to get comments from Teenage Fan Club fans. And I do know that James Griffiths, if you're listening to this, I do know that you're a fan of them. Maybe I should be focusing on a different album. So that's my review of Endless Arcade by Teenage Fan Club. The Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and their latest, When God Was Great. And this was very much a reggae album with a modern edge. They're informally referred to as the Boss Tones, an American ska punk band from Boston, Massachusetts, and they were formed a long time back in 1983. They're often credited as one of the leaders in the ska punk genre, and the creators of the subgenre ska core. But I couldn't comment on that because I don't follow these genres quite as rigidly as some, although there's certainly ska in there, and there's also a deal of punk. 1989 was their debut effort, and they toured extensively. I have got a few of their albums, but I have to confess that the dust has settled on most of them, in fact all of them, and I haven't really given them an earful. They host an annual Hometown Throwdown music festival yearly near Boston, and are very famous for that. For the others on this release, I have to confess I've listened to the album twice, and I've detailed notes on the third listen, but I didn't get through the whole of it. Just not enough time, man. So a bit of a track look now. Fast and Furious from Decide, the opener, and on Move, the horns strut their stuff. I Don't Believe in Anything is a thumpingly fast-paced reggae rocker. Certain things, we hear a little bit of pedal steel guitar intertwined with the horns, which is quite nice. Lonely Boy I quite liked. It's got a funky dance style, very much reminiscent of what we were hearing in the UK in '69 through Trojan Records. The Killing of Georgie Part 3 is probably the highlight. It mixes those horns with crunchy electric guitar riffs and hooky pop choruses. The rest I'm not going to comment on. I have to say that I'm probably going to come back to this album because I do like reggae. I'm not that familiar with reggae punk, but of course I do like the ska influenced rock that No Doubt throw together back in the 90s. So there we have it. The name of the album is When God Was Great, and it's by the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. Right, let's move on to the next album, and this one is Cavalcade by a band called Black Midi. Now, I don't know anything about this band, and so I sort of launched into this and got a big surprise. They debuted in 2019, described as energetic and boundary testing reconfiguration of post-punk. I've not heard that one, but the second which was described as more experimental with art rock and math rock, whatever that is, as a genre. What I found was an array of instrumentation, too many really to mention. But I did note on Wikipedia that there are bouzouki on this, which is a Greek instrument, I believe. Lots of flutes, accordions, and it's got a percussive delight to it. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, it really does shake you to the bones. The first track of any note is John L. It's a ferocious jazz rock montage with a fusion with an odd spoken word, and the noise is quite deafening. It's described as musical anarchy, and I think that's quite apt. I nearly aborted it, but then I waited a little and it started to materialise on me with sort of Robert Fripp and Adrian Bouleau King Crimson influences. So I stayed tuned and I was pleasantly surprised. And there's also a touch of Frank Zappa style guitar on it. Marlene Dietrich is next up. And this is a really a complete contrast, a jazzy, loungy jaunt with some croony vocals and very understated strings. It's almost from another era or another band, possibly sort of 40s jazz lounge. The next is a bit of a mouthful, but I'm going to talk about it. Chondromalacia patella. 5 minutes of experimental jazz elements, stirred with progressive passages. It's pretty frantic and dynamic, but keep an open mind whilst listening, because it segues into King Crimson stylish work. Slow is next up, and Fripp's work is certainly got his fingerprints on this one. It sounds like it's from the later 80s period of Crimson, and the guitar also tends to nod to Adrian Bouleau. There's some sax that emerges back in the mix, and it stirs to an explosive finale. Diamond Stuff, the last, there's a few tracks that I'm not going to go into detail, but this one's worth doing. It's sort of, it's tiptoes in on an acoustic picking style that haunts the mood. It's very minimalistic, but it grows and metamorphosizes whilst you're hearing into a string-laden piece with much quality instrumentation. So let's sit back and take in that. I've got the feeling that this album could become quite a favourite with me if I remember to put it on. Power is written all over this band, and their delivery is certainly such that you will have an impact. It will have an impact on you, and I would thoroughly recommend it. So that's it. Cavalcade, and it's by the second album by a band called Black Midi, who are a London-based band, I understand. Okay, the final one then on this new release package is an album called The Changing Wilderness by an American Will Stratton, born in 1987 in California, raised in New Jersey, an American singer-songwriter and composer. He began taking piano lessons at age 4, spent a year at university studying philosophy, and then finished college, where he switched to studying music composition. And there at that college, Bennington, he composed his first pieces for other ensembles and also strings. But he released his first album during the summer of 2007, and he's released 6 in all. And his music is very much influenced by folk and country. He's a self-professed disciple of Nick Drake, and on listening, you're immediately struck by the beauty and detail in his playing. I've listened to this album a couple of times. It grows on me slowly. Infertile Air opens up. It's a very dreamy, spacious sound, very gentle. The harmonies are a highlight. The Rain, I like this. It's an intricate trickery on acoustic guitar by Stratton, very guitar centric, and reminds me at times of some of Lindsey Buckingham's acoustic work. Fate's Ghost, is the third track, all consuming this. It's got soft vocals, which creates a warm glow, and faint horns back in the mix. The guitar work is simplistic, effective, with touches of country steel work, and he owes a deal, I feel, to folk artists such as James Taylor and Loudon Wainwright, without Loudon's humour, of course. And he also had some feminine harmonies, which is a welcome to the sound, to that country air. But I think it's a grower, this one. So if you like this style of music, get to listen to The Changing Wilderness by Will Stratton. Right, now, I have now completed this video in detail, but I have to say I've got a lot more to cover in the next one. In the next one, I'll be looking at King Gizzard's latest album, Butterfly 300, a band called Black Country, new band. I'll look at theirs. The latest release by Garbage, No God, No Masters. I'm also going to look at the latest by the Beninese diva Angelique Kidjo and Mother Nature, and a new release by Liz Phair called Soberish, and I might even squeeze in, Seeking New Gods by Griff Rhys, and there's still more to come. The number of releases are quite awesome here. But anyway, that's to look forward to. Stay tuned.